You guys know what Pizzagate is about?
Oh, I'd love to hear it, Eddie.
Pizzagate is real.
Since Pizzagate began to blow up online,
You familiar with it?
Pizzagate?
Yes.
No, but sounds
you have no-
dope.
Yes,
I'm in on Pizzagate.
What is Pizzagate?
Okay,
In layman
Pizzagate
terms.
is
Pizzagate is a trap.
Well, why aren't you still covering Pizzagate?
This theory is called Pizzagate.
And you say there's a very simple explanation for that.
Yeah, I'm very glad that you've had us on today.
Clinton and Podesta have a series of smuggling tunnels that connect to the basement of this pizzeria.
there's a guy who worked for Hillary Clinton's campaign, and his name is Podesta.
Former campaign manager John Podesta ran a child sex ring at a pizzeria.
Please don't bring up Pizzagate.
I just want to know what Pizzagate was.
Secret sex ring.
You brought up Pizzagate.
No, he brought up Pizzagate.
Police say a 28-year-old gunman entered Comet Ping Pong and fired off an assault rifle.
When this man walked into your restaurant with this gun,
The shooter claims he was investigating the so-called Pizzagate story. Pizzagate story. Pizzagate. 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 Pizzagate.
Welcome to the Pizzagate Files, a series dedicated to unraveling the on-running, seemingly never-ending conspiracy known as Pizzagate. I'm your host, Dan Wright, with co-host Robbie Martin, and we will try to uncover or figure out what the hell is going on with Pizzagate. I should say up front that neither I nor Robbie are adherents to the theory, but we do have open minds and are trying to, and also are just interested in the phenomenon of Pizzagate. I've come across it numerous times online. I've gotten a series of emails about it. I've tried to avoid it, but now I've given in and will no longer avoid it. But instead, we'll try to figure out how it started, why people believe it, and separating fact from fiction. And Robbie has a similar interest. We're both skeptical. Robbie's a little bit more open than me, but we're going to try to figure out what's going on. So, Robbie, can you, for people who have somehow avoided this, who have been on the internet and somehow avoided this, first off, congratulations. I don't know how you've done it, but good for you. But for those people, can you offer a brief description of Pizzagate, a brief one, and then we'll go from there?
Yeah, so this theory that became known as Pizzagate, I originally saw it right before the election, right before Election Day, starting with something that somebody found in the John Podesta WikiLeaks emails about spirit cooking, which this performance artist who attracts a lot of rich kind of, celebrities and rich elitists who think they're very cultured. She throws these private parties. Her name is Marina Abramovic, I think, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, who does these so-called spirit cooking parties. And, a lot of people on the internet thought they were actual, genuine occult rituals. A lot of Christian evangelical conspiracy types thought that they were satanic rituals, and that the Podestas, John Podesta and his brother, were both involved in satanic rituals. And then somehow that meant that Hillary Clinton's campaign and her people were practicing Satanists as well. But then very quickly, somebody thought that they had discovered code words. Several different people on the internet thought that they had discovered code words in the John Podesta emails that meant there were secret codes for not just prostitution and sex, but child sex and child sex trafficking. Most of these emails involved discussions about pizza and pizza parties, some of them about pizza party fundraisers for the Hillary Clinton campaign. And one of the emails in particular The reason it started to center around pizza so much is because in the emails, there was discussion about doing a fundraiser at a establishment called Comet Ping Pong, a pizza parlor in DC. And from there, independent crowdsourced, researchers on Reddit and on 4chan started looking into this pizza parlor that was mentioned. They found the guy's Instagram account who runs the pizza parlor and started finding things that they thought were evidence of child sex and child sex trafficking in his Instagram profile or pedophilia. So a mixture. Sometimes it's, all about child sex trafficking. Sometimes the theory goes all the way to, they're murdering children in these satanic rituals that have something to do with spirit cooking. And then they're also trafficking them and having sex with them. But at the bare minimum, it's basically that John Podesta and his brother and other people associated with the Hillary Clinton campaign are secretly pedophiles who talk about their own sexual preferences, pedophilia, over coded emails. That's basically what the theory is, as far as I understand it. But then it's also evolved into something called Pedogate, which
all right, wait. Before we go, let's be okay. So before we go into the minutiae here, because I know anyone who just heard that for the first time is like, what the hell are you talking about? So that's a good encapsulation. So the gate part is that, as you said, there was this hack of John Podesta's emails or leak or however, let's leave that one aside. It got to WikiLeaks. They published them. Yeah. People thought there was a code within them. And there was a reference to this performance artist, Abramovic, or whatever her name is, who is a famous, I would say performance artist. I think that's fair. She's very famous. She did something with Jay-Z. She had a documentary made about her that I caught pieces of, where she does all this kind of provocative art. Like I saw one.
She's not just like known for being in some kind of a cult practitioner. That's merely one of her styles of performance art.
Right. It's not even, and for the people who are, it's not even clear that she has any spiritual convictions about this. She's just a provocateur. I mean, I remember seeing one sketch where her and a male counterpart would simply stand on opposite sides of the room and run as hard as they could and smack into each other. And then she went on, there's stuff where she goes on hunger strikes. And there's one, I think the documentary is called, if I'm remembering, The Artist is Present.
Yeah.
Where she had a show in which she sat at a table and people lined up. I think it would have been in the New York Museum of Modern Art. Don't hold me to that. I think that is where it was held. And people for a series of days, I'm not sure how many days, would sit in front of her and just look at her, and she would look at them for a period of a minute or something. So, I mean, this is someone who does provocative performance art. I'm not saying, I don't know if she's satanic or not personally, but I wouldn't just read it and go, this is a Satanist who is a full-time, or, this is their spiritual beliefs. So start with that. That was a weird email. I'm going to say, as someone who, maybe I should give a little background for how I interacted with it the first time. I write for Shadowproof, and I wrote a lot about the Podesta emails. And when we were going through them, we were looking for real content, which there was, by the way. There was the emails. Probably the most explosive was in preparation. This is the irony of this. In preparation for Hillary's speeches getting out, which she had a transcript of, they had someone go through the speeches and pull out the most problematic stuff she said when she was giving these speeches. Now, no one ever got a copy of the speeches, but we did get a copy of this, in which case she talked about Goldman Sachs. She talked about a hemispheric union, which of course set off a lot of people who already hated NAFTA, let alone a actual union. And she said all sorts of other things about how the banks are good and banks should self-regulate. Those were real stories, and nothing that's happened related to Pizzagate takes away from the fact that there's a lot of real reporting that came out of the Podesta emails. Yeah. But people
Was the stuff about the Clinton Foundation was in his emails too, wasn't it?
There was Clinton Foundation stuff. There was stuff about meeting with lobbyists and setting things up.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it's a really interesting read to understand how power works in Washington and how places like that John Podesta was the head of before he became Hillary's campaign chairman.
Yeah.
He was head of the Center for American Progress and how they coordinated things to kind of run, lobby for interest groups that want to get in front of Congress. It's very interesting. But there were, I don't want to say, because we want people to interact with us and talk to us. So I'm just saying amateur in the sense that they were not approaching it professionally. Not that they didn't have the capacity to be professionals. And seeing this other stuff and started making a big deal out of it. Initially it was, there were some conspiracy theories around it. And a lot of people sort of tamped it down and said, this isn't even the real story. Check out the Goldman Sachs stuff. And then when the spirit cooking thing came out, right, the people like myself and others who had said, stop, there's nothing here, you're being weird, saw the spirit cooking stuff. And we didn't really have an answer for what the hell this was. It seemed weird. And that seems to be when the people who would make the people online who had made Pizzagate a phenomenon started really getting interested. I believe, I'm not sure when and through the course of these episodes, we should figure out the chronology or the chanology, as the case may be, when exactly people began thinking, okay, we've uncovered a code. So, but just to give some context to this, there were people at the time who were reading the Podesta emails who did not see any of this and were interacting with people who were having these different interpretations. And one of the ones that I can say, as someone who read a lot of the Podesta emails, I really don't see the code. I mean, the cheese pizza. Now, that in fairness, I don't know a lot about the pedophilia thing. So when someone said cheese pizza, hence Pizzagate, right, is code for child porn or something, I went, I've never heard that. But other people said they had heard that. I mean, I don't know what So that's my approach. That's how I interacted with Pizzagate initially. Was people were responding to stuff I was tweeting and writing about on Facebook or on Shadowproof about this topic, and I had no idea what they were talking about. I didn't understand. Yes, the spirit cooking thing was weird, but then I learned who it was, and I'm less weirded out about it now. But that seems to be where it came from. Where did you first interact with it, Robbie? Where did you first encounter it in your own, I guess, internet experience?
I think it was from, the first thing I saw was the spirit cooking stuff, and the way that got absorbed by the conspiracy movement. I knew that there was going to be a lot of attention focused on it right before the election, and the amount of attention just around that was ridiculous. It was almost like setting off some kind of nuclear bomb in the conspiracy movement. I mean, people were like, this is it was like the biggest revelation ever for a lot of people, especially like Christian people who, think that some of our leaders are actually, Satanists or even demons in some cases. But I think it was maybe a couple of days before the actual election, because I remember the spirit cooking thing came out, I think like right before the weekend before the election. And then maybe like the day before the election is when I started seeing people saying they're talking in code in these emails. But I think I remember that BuzzFeed article that you pulled up for me a couple of weeks ago showing where that very first, allegation of NYPD insiders are about to make arrests in the Anthony Weiner case having to do with Hillary Clinton.
Right.
I didn't see that actual tweet or message, but I remember hearing weird rumblings and rumors in the conspiracy movement, and also on some more mainstream right-wing websites like Breitbart ran that Eric Prince interview, and one of the things they pulled from it was sort of coinciding with the James Comey email investigation announcement right before the election, and it was that the email investigation and the emails found on Anthony Weiner's computer were going to lead to arrests, possible sex crime arrests within Hillary's campaign, other people, and that they were about to make arrests. So when I started seeing the code word stuff after spear cooking, then I started to see people pulling from that narrative that had already sort of been laid out weeks before and being like, this must be the other shoe dropping, so to speak, of the, these allegations about what was really in Anthony Weiner's emails, that people like Eric Prince were talking about, and people like Steve Pachenik, that guy who goes on the Alex Jones show, was talking about. I mean, there was this weird rumor campaign going on weeks before the election that Hillary Clinton was somehow involved, not just on the Lolita Express, but also, Jeffrey Epstein's plane, but also her campaign itself was involved in child sex trafficking.
Right. So this gets to, it initially started with independent researchers online, I guess you could say, trying to tie in what they thought they uncovered with code words and whatnot into a news cycle, or a news story rather, about the election. That is the sort of not surface, but that's a key ingredient in what became Pizzagate. But as you noted, and this is the part that I think is interesting for us to explore and to figure out, and maybe people can talk to us about it, is there is what I would call supporting conspiracy theories for my analysis of Pizzagate, meaning there is a long-running conspiracy theory that I was not aware of until I looked into this about pedophilia at the highest levels of government. I've never heard this before. I mean, and by the way, I don't mean that some people who are in positions of power are pedophiles. It seems to break into two things that are both interesting but somewhat contradictory. So one is the elite, quote unquote, are just this predatory group of people. And they're predatory in sex too. They're just disgusting, monstrous people. And this is just what they do for fun. They're satanic. And then another separate theory, and I've heard both vis-a-vis Pizzagate, is the elite are just these cold-hearted power players, and they get people in positions of power who are pedophiles to blackmail them with essentially it's essentially what was in the news right now, compromat, that it's some sort of compromising material.
Yep.
And that they like to put these people in power because then these people will do what they say, because they know if they don't, I'll expose you as a pedophile and your life will be destroyed. You'll go to jail, everything. So those two conspiracy theories that make up the sort of elite sexual deviancy conspiracy theory, I think that is a major supporting conspiracy theory, pre-existing, if you like. Right? We're talking about healthcare recently, pre-existing condition. It's pre-existing. This is very common. I did not know this, but this is very common among conspiracy culture, whatever, that there is this pedophilic, satanic elite. And so that's why partly, so we had two key catalysts for this blowing up in my analysis. I don't know, but this is my theory on it. One is it's part of an ongoing news story related to one of the most major events in world history, a United States presidential election. So that's a big catalyst. There's a lot of interest. And two is there's this pre-existing theory out there that a lot of people on at least the fringes believe, which is that people in the elite, this is what they do, either because they're just predatory people or because it's useful to have compromising material. So when this came out, it all seemed to congeal or connect and explode. What do you think of that theory?
I think I mean, I mostly agree with it. I think the only extra component there was, and you and I have talked about this a little bit on other podcasts, like on Media Roots, about this, how there was so much hype and promise from the ongoing WikiLeaks that people had this feeling where the other shoe was going to drop and that there had to be something more. Like it wasn't enough that we were seeing sort of a lot about stuff about the internal corruption and the Hillary campaign and that it was being rigged against Bernie Sanders. It was almost like, and I don't know if WikiLeaks stoked the flames of this. They might have, by talking about things like Seth Rich's murder and putting up a reward for that and other sort of conspiracy bait that they threw out. But I do think that a lot of people thought that Hillary was somehow going to go to jail from the WikiLeaks. And, and I do think WikiLeaks helped sort of fuel that hype, obviously, on some level. And when it didn't come in the form of like Podesta talking about, corrupt lobbying type of activities and things like that. This is sort of what that not mentality, but that passion for hoping that there was something more there. I think it helped turn into Pizzagate. I mean, it kind of, that's where it found its place. That's kind of, and then, we don't have to talk about this too much, but you've compared the two, is that I think you even wrote an article about it, about how the Democrats did it also, and they channeled their sort of hype or, that feeling that they wanted to keep going into the Russiagate stuff on some level.
Yeah, I mean, there's a great story that came out from the New York Times. Are you getting feedback? I'm getting a little bit.
No.
Okay. I mean, there's a great story that came out in the New York Times that said Democrats are going closer to conspiracy theories, and it's about how in the wake of Trump's election, they've kind of become more conspiratorial. Now, I think that's probably true, and I also think with the Russia thing, there's support. There's the catalyst for that is partly people who are trying to explain why they blew the election. Right? There's a much more cynical motive there, and that's interesting to say. Is there a cynical motive to Pizzagate? I think there could be people who are just promoting it because they hate Hillary Clinton or they hate John Podesta or they just hate liberals. But my takeaway, unlike Russia, where I think there are actually sincere people now because people are getting wound up, which is scary. But with Pizzagate, I think the people who promoted it actually believe it. I don't think they're doing it. And this is, I mean, we'll learn as we go through this process, but I don't think they're doing it just to sort of smear someone's reputation. Although clearly calling someone a pedophile is a great way to smear someone's reputation. But I think there's some sincerity to it. And I think the Russia conspiracy stuff is much more cynical, much more partisan, and it serves a lot of interests, not just fundraising, but also kind of, why did we blow it? Oh, well, okay, yes, we could have put more volunteers in Michigan and Wisconsin. And yes, we could have had a better strategy, but we were fighting Russia. Who knew how are we supposed to win that race? So I think that's the key difference. I agree that there's conspiratorial thinking. The New York Times article at the Upshot section gives us some overview of that. And I don't think it's fake news related. I think people want to believe, right? I want to believe, right? I think we were talking about the X-Files at one point. I want to believe is like the slogan, but so they want to believe it because it's easier to believe. So there's some partisan Democrats who probably actually believe it at this point because they've said it to them. I mean, they've hyped themselves up so much. They've invested so much emotion in it. But I actually think the Pizzagate people, from my read on the situation, have always been pretty sincere. And I don't even know what's the end game of Pizzagate? I mean, the end game of the Russia conspiracy thing is to undermine Trump and to, invest from their best expectations or hopes, get him impeached somehow, which isn't going to happen, but that's their best intentions. It's all very political. I don't know what's the end game of Pizzagate? Some sort of arrest?
Well, you could argue that there's definitely, there has to be, I mean, some cynical people who are helping push it out there. And I don't know, I can't name any of those people who are pushing it who aren't sincere believers. I mean, like, was Eric Prince going out there and saying that stuff like because he had heard it on some right-wing conspiracy website, or did he actually, it's hard to know what he was doing during that Breitbart interview.
Or Mike Flynn's son.
Exactly. I mean, it seems like Flynn and his son are two cases of people who actually are sincere about it. And I guess the only thing I can say about what its goal was, or what's the end game is, what was the end game of Trump and Roger Stone sort of propelling the idea that Bill Clinton was like not just a horn dog and would sexually harass people, but he was also like a serial rapist, and things like that.
Yeah, but there isn't. I can identify one for that one. In that case, as we saw before that debate, that was to neutralize charges against Trump of being sexist. And now, when that video came out called the "Grab Him by the Pussy" video with Billy Bush of
called the grab him by the pussy video.
whatever. I mean, it's a grab. I don't know what they called it.
Yeah.
It was an Entertainment Tonight. It was with Billy Bush.
Yeah.
And that Roger Stone wrote a book called Hillary's War on Women or something. I believe that's the title. And that was that book. Not to necessarily attack Bill Clinton as much as it was to defend Trump from those attacks. He held up before the debate. I believe it was the second or the third debate. And he held a press conference with those women who he had flown in, and Roger Stone and people he worked with apparently had some role in that. Absolutely. And they took questions and talked about being sexually assaulted by Bill Clinton, and that Hillary Clinton covered it up. So in that case, to that madness. And it was clearly effective because, pardon me, to a large degree, it succeeded. I mean, despite being caught on tape talking about this kind of sexual assault scenario, it effectively neutralized the issue because it clouded the issue, which is what they needed to use it for. So I think I'm not sure, I would call that one a very cynical use of.
But I mean, don't you think that some of those same people who are, I mean, because that got some, that, like you said, it helped neutralize his sexual assault or harassment allegations, Trump's. But I feel like the Pizzagate thing is a perfect way to like make that, attach it to that. And it's almost like without that event happening previously, that, all the light made of Bill Clinton's, victims, I feel like Pizzagate wouldn't have been able to explode like it did. But again, I have no idea if Eric Prince, someone like Eric Prince was sincere. That has to be looked at closer. And, like conspiracy people like that guy, Steve Pachenik, who had the video that got 3 million views, and then Drudge Report ran about how, there was about to be some major revelation in the WikiLeaks. It was going to, take Hillary Clinton down, and the deep state was going to try to run a counter coup for the Clintons and all that stuff.
Right. And there's another part of it that supports that you mentioned a few times that we should bring in here for clarification for people who haven't heard of any of this. Jeffrey Epstein was a financial, I think he ran a hedge fund. He one time worked for Goldman Sachs, I believe. And he was ultimately pled guilty. He had a plea agreement for sexual assault on minors in Florida. He allegedly, the Lolita Express, which you talked about, was something about he had an island somewhere where he would do sexual assaults on underage girls. Now, obviously, there's not a lot of evidence for that, or there is some evidence for that. What we know for sure, because we have to be clear here, and I think that's something we're definitely going to try to do, because I'm not accusing anyone of a crime, especially someone rich enough to sue me into the ground. But Epstein definitely pled guilty to something related to hiring local underage girls in Florida to give him massages that turned sexual. That's the nature of what he pled to. Now, there are accusations, including civil suits, that I believe have been thrown out about an island in which Epstein, Bill Clinton, and Donald Trump, and Alan Dershowitz, of all people, were accused of being participants in and participating in underage sexual activity. Now, that story's been around for a while, and there's some corroborating evidence that something went on this island.
Yeah.
And it's not clear, and it's clear that, and I mean, Epstein and Clinton, I mean, Epstein being a very rich man was also a fundraiser, gave a lot of money, including one of his people he patronized was the Clinton family. So there's something there. That story did not occur during the period of the election. It has been a pre-existing story for years, but more and more details came out. And so that got there, as what I would say is there's sort of this vortex. And this is a very interesting part of the phenomenon that I don't particularly understand, which is that there's people building this narrative. and they suck other stories. Like there's this there or this or maybe people not building it. Just this is what everyone's thinking, a sort of collective unconsciousness thing that sucks other information in. So the Jeffrey Epstein thing gets sucked into the Pizzagate vortex, repurposed, and is now a key link between, the Anthony Weiner sexting scandal, which initially derailed his congressional career, derailed his mayoral race, and then was added to because he had done it now with an underage girl, which is what he got in trouble for. So he can't stop himself, apparently, from sexting. He just can't stop himself. So he gets pulled in. Now, there's a connection with Anthony Weiner, unlike, I would argue, Jeffrey Epstein, which is a little bit more tenuous. With Anthony Weiner, his wife was Huma Abedin, who was Hillary's chief. She was kind of her, what you would call body man or body woman in this case, chief aide, traveled with her everywhere. And Comey, it's hard to remember this because the Russia part of the, I guess, conspiracy is overtaken so much. But Comey sent a letter out to Congress about 2 weeks before the election, and what you could call an October surprise, saying that there were emails related to the email investigation on Anthony Weiner's computer, and that they were going to reopen the investigation to view these emails. And he wanted to let Congressman Jason Chaffetz, who is, I believe, chairman of the House Government Oversight Committee, about it. Now, of course, this letter to Jason Chaffetz was immediately leaked to the press and became a huge political firestorm, and did, according to Robbie Mook, who was Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, and other people associated with the campaign, did derail them off their message, which was they were going to hit Trump as hard as they could for the last 2 weeks to drive his negatives up even more, and hopefully that would help them win. So they're blamed. So there's so many excuses for why they lost. One of them is this Comey letter, quote unquote. But that is related to Anthony Weiner and his sexting scandal. So you do have pedophilia-ish connections, although it's
go ahead. One thing with that. I mean, and there were some people, some right-wing websites like Gateway Pundit, some of the little more tabloidy ones, they were running with not just Anthony Weiner was sexting a 15-year-old girl, because I don't even think we had any transcripts of what was discussed with that 15-year-old girl, or if we did, they weren't very sexual in nature. The one thing that they ran with was the picture of him holding his son in the underwear with the half chub, like holding his toddler son. And sort of a lot of, if you look at the comments of all those websites, it's like, oh my God, what a sicko. He's also a pedo, like kind of that we're already jumping to that conclusion when
they were conflating it. They were conflating it, you're saying.
And I mean, he might, I think we talked about this, like he wants to be like a sexy, person picking up girls on the internet, but also wants to show how cool of a dad he is at the same time. He's got some sort of weird mixture of the two things that he uses to pick up women, which it's possible that he does that. I think it's less possible that he's an actual pedophile, but I wanted to mention.
Well, I just put a little addendum on that. It's not that relevant. He actually never has sex with these women. That's the weird. There's so many weird parts about Anthony Weiner.
Sexting and phone sex.
It's phone sex.
Yeah. So
whatever.
And now that you're mentioning this and why Eric Prince, connected the FBI investigation with Anthony Weiner being a potential pedophile. There was another thing that Roger Stone helped propel. Before he was on the kick of calling Bill Clinton a rapist, one of his favorite things to talk about on shows like the Alex Jones Show and other places was that Huma Abedin was Hillary Clinton's secret lesbian lover, and that Hillary Clinton actually had a sexual preference for not just women, but young women. And so, again, Epstein, a lot of these people say, and I don't know if this is true, maybe it is. I know Gawker and other places listed the transcripts of the Lolita Express with Bill Clinton's name on it. But a lot of these same people are saying, no, Hillary Clinton also flew on the Lolita Express. She went down to Lolita Island, and then they're jumping to the conclusion, and I don't know which part of that's true. If she even flew on the Lolita Express, maybe she did. But then they're jumping to the conclusion that she must also be a pedophile who likes having sex with very young girls.
Right.
So then that kind of linked together too. And that, that was part of a lot of the early Pizzagate rumblings, like, oh my God, maybe this means this. And we already know that it's probably likely that Huma Abedin and Hillary Clinton are a couple, and that, You know,
that they're a couple now. Okay.
you know, secret lovers. And then Roger Stone was basically saying because Hooman Abedin travels with Hillary Clinton, that means they sleep together in the same room, and you know that it snowballed from there.
It sounds like some juvenile fantasy. Like,
yeah, I mean it's the same, but the same people who are pushing this have also insinuated that Michelle Obama is actually a transsexual. She was born a man. So these are all things, believe it or not. Bill Clinton's black son is one of those things that has become embedded into the framework.
I forgot about Danny Williams. I forgot about that.
Part of this moving train. It's like the more time goes on, the more, you know, the Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump campaign went on, the more of these things got absorbed and sort of turned into this overall patchwork.
Yeah, but see, here's interesting about this, and why I think this show is worth doing is, I agree. There's all these wild stuff. I mean, it's the comment section. People can say whatever they want. That's the internet, and that's part of the joy of the internet. It's part of the dark side or debasement. What? There's something special about Pizzagate, right? There's something different. It has such staying power. It became such a phenomenon. That's what interests me, is what there's been like, people have been calling Hillary Clinton a lesbian ever since she cut her hair short. I mean, that's not new. And of course, homophobic, whatever. But it's not like a new thing. And of course, I mean that's
no, you're right. Yeah. It's
just part of one of the things you get hit with, that she's been getting hit with for years. And then, I mean, I don't even care if it is true, but no one's able to substantiate it. But the Pizzagate thing took on really its own. It has its own special, or at least a stronger, oxygen supply. Like it's like with Hillary being a lesbian. It comes out, it goes. There's nothing really to it. It doesn't stick. Maybe that's the way I should say it. Something about Pizzagate stuck. Now, is that because I have to, like I said in the beginning, I'm just a total skeptic. I don't buy any of it. But are there parts of it that you think are at least interesting or coincidental, or because now, before you answer, there was something that happened, because Pizzagate died down a little bit. It's still raging for people who are watching. I'm telling you, it's raging on the underbelly of the internet. It's been banned from everywhere. It's been banned from Reddit. All those sites that you talked about, it's been banned from most of these platforms, but it's still raging. But it was simmering a little bit after a gunman who was apparently inspired by Pizzagate went to Comet Pizza and shot at the floor, or was trying to uncover part of it, which we'll get into, I'm sure, at some point later.
On a podcast, we talked about that very situation happening, and it happened like 2 weeks later. I mean, this is the shitty part, is like, you and I have been looking at this for a while, and just tracking it and sort of watching it's evolved, and it was obvious that it was building to such a hysteria that was something like that was going to happen. You know, there were already right-wing alt-right journalists who were thinking there were kids in the basement periscoping news broadcasts from inside, you know, while they were ordering pizza. So it's just a matter of time.
You're right. We did talk about that. It was getting to a boil. It was getting so intense that someone was going to do something. You know, there's that V for Vendetta where it's all building up. They say, and then someone just has to do something stupid. And it's when the cop shoots the girl in the Guy Fawkes mask. It's like, it seemed like that was like, there was this crescendo coming. But after that, it seemed almost like it peaked out a little bit. And then, and this is my question I was going to ask you, Ben Swan, who's I think a pretty decent reporter over at CBS, and he has his own channel and stuff, did something on Pizzagate. And he was immediately, people were screaming at him because of the explosive nature of it. But he actually went through it, and I didn't see much in there, but didn't you say you thought some of it was interesting at least?
Well, not his thing specifically.
Not his thing? Okay.
And I mean, Ben Swan, basically, just if I can encapsulate him without dissing what he does, is he kind of turns a lot of modern conspiracy lore, but he chooses ones that are more on the forefront, not flat Earth conspiracies and things like that, but things like anomalies with 9/11 or different things like that. I mean, he takes things like that from popular conspiracy culture and turns them into very traditional sort of nightly news segments, local news segments on a legitimate, I think it's a Fox affiliate. And I think some of the stuff he's done in the past is good. I'm not surprised he picked Pizzagate. It seems, like he pretty much talks about the things that have been on InfoWars or We Are Change, websites like that. So, but it wasn't when I actually watched his special, and he covered it in a fairly careful way, but I was surprised which things he chose to talk about and which things he didn't. And just when you said that that there really was reaching this fever pitch, and this was maybe a month and a half ago when the gunman came in, maybe 3 months ago, actually. Does that sound right? About 3 months ago?
It's I think December-ish, I want to say.
When that happened, Alex Jones realized that he got cold feet about the whole thing, and he started deleting tons of videos off his website. A bunch of Pizzagate people were like, now he's in on it because he's deleting videos. David Seaman, another popular conspiracy guy, he deleted his own YouTube channel. Apparently he just did it himself. He wasn't forced to take it down or anything. This should be dramatic, I guess. Probably the most widely viewed Pizzagate researcher on the internet. And then Ben Swan's social media disappeared after that segment. So this drove a lot of the paranoia later. But, one of the things
very likely, though, you could argue, and we should find out. They talked to lawyers who said, you're now in a space where you could start being held liable for stuff. I'm not saying they said take it down, but they said be careful.
Of course, yeah. I mean, I would not be surprised if John Podesta had a really good team of lawyers working for him, or even the pizza place got some, maybe money for a lawyer from the Clinton campaign in some way, because it's like, I don't know what's going on. Yeah, I suspect some kind of either legal threats, lawyer letters, or just the bosses of those companies know that something could make them liable for talking about it.
But Ben Swan's thing, though, just before we move on from it, is he was using, from what I saw, the symbols. That's what I agree with you. Like, I watched and I thought this was a weird thing to focus on. Why he's talking about like the symbols, not.
And the Instagram account of
oh, okay, that's right.
Ping Pong, or the fuck his name is. James Alefantis is his real name. And we can go through every facet of it. It'll take more than probably this episode too.
Yeah.
There are some interesting coincidences in this. For me personally, in the emails themselves, the ones talking about pizza and walnut sauce, and is it better to do Domino's on cheese or on pasta? Those are things that people are like, that's obvious code. The handkerchief with the pizza related map is obvious code. Well, not if this guy is like a rich guy with a handkerchief and he does pizza fundraisers and there's like a pizza hop, like a bar hop type thing going on. Obviously, that doesn't seem that suspicious to me. The guy's also thinks of himself as a culinary wizard.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, I should say that
art collector, his own basement in his house. Everyone's like, oh, he's obviously doing shit in his own basement. I read why he built a basement, and it makes perfect sense for an artsy fartsy rich guy. He built it to collect video installation art, which you'd have to be kind of a moronic rich dude to buy someone's video installation art from a gallery. In general, video installation art is generally bad art in the first place. I mean, there's definitely good video installation art, but then on top of that, so what was I going to say about the? I don't even remember.
I just want to interject one real thing quick about Podesta. That people, and this is where we get into interpretations about seemingly benign stuff, and this is going to be a big part of, I think, what we explore here, because I read these emails, as much emails as I could. Obviously, there's a ton of them that we still should go through. John Podesta talks about food a lot. That's because he's a douchebag. And I say that with he is one of these rich guys who fancies himself a chef.
Yeah.
This is not new. If you know anything about him, this is what he does. He brags about how good of a cook he is. He talks about lobster all the time. That's one of the things even people on the left in the mainstream or mainstreamish or non-fringe, I should say,
Yeah.
joked about the fact that this guy's so obsessed with lobster, which tastes like crap, because just like the video installation art, he has no taste. He just has a lot of money. So he's constantly talking about how great lobster is. Anybody who's had lobster knows this, you're not going to be spending all your time. It's a signaling. It's a class signal to talk about how you eat lobster all the time, just like buying a basement to put in crappy video installation art. So you could read that and say this is all code for some sort of malevolent activity, I guess. And maybe, like I said, we're going to hear people out. Or you could just say this guy is this typical, bland bourgeois douchebag who talks a lot about lobster and buys a lot of crappy art. I mean, that's the other part. Like his brother, Tony Podesta, who is a power play in Washington with the Podesta Group, who ironically is under investigation now for lobbying for Russia against sanctions on Ukraine. So, but he's also has and some of his art, and this is a big thing that also drove Pizzagate, this Instagram account of Tony Podesta, or rather pictures of Tony Podesta's artwork.
And descriptions. And
it's weird. I agree. Like it's unnerving, which is the point.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say, so that's one of the things that I do find compelling in and of itself. Like I was surprised that John Podesta had Marina Abramovich doing, stupid occultic style performance art in his house just for that reason alone. That's a surprising thing. That is weird. That doesn't mean, all those other things we talked about. This is another one of those things where John Podesta, his art taste seemed to lean a little bit more macabre, sort of more grotesque. Apparently he does have pictures of like young shirtless children, topless girls, young girls in like weird suggestive poses. And also he collects art by a Dutch, I don't know if he's Dutch or Swedish, maybe neither, who does paintings of children in like weird bondage like scenarios. So he collects art by that artist. I don't know if he has any of those paintings up in his actual house. There's actually a old Washington Post article where they're talking about going through Tony Podesta's house, and the wife is laughing about how a guest was gasped when she walked into a room and saw a photograph of an underage child on the wall because it was like nude or something. So I don't know if that's right. Evidence to me that they're pedophiles. That's just evidence to me that they're creeps, and they think of themselves as sophisticated, and ultimately they're boring, pretentious, rich power players. And if you read his emails, of just thinking of all these emails that we've read, I can't remember him having like a really human, down-to-earth conversation with anyone showing that he has like genuine relationships with other human beings or people.
Right. And I mean, here's,
you know what I mean?
That's a key point. And I wonder, when we talk to people who believe this, I would definitely like to ask them, like, is there a kind of culture shock aspect to this? Meaning people who don't live in DC or New York or LA and aren't around, sociopathic rich people, understand that like these people, I mean, they might have weird taste. See, this is I think the issue here, right? Now, on the one hand, you go, wow. So you could look at it this way. You go, wow, he's got pictures of naked kids and this art around his house. What a pedophile. Or you could look at it and go, if he was really a pedophile, would he have naked pictures of his kids around his house? Like, you can look at it two different ways.
Well, too many people have watched Breaking Bad, I think. I think this is, you know what?
True Detective.
Well, not just True Detective, but have you seen Breaking Bad?
Yeah.
Okay. The whole idea of Los Polos Hermanos, the chicken place, hiding in plain sight. I do think that that's sort of the cultural idea of like a massive meth making operation hiding in plain sight is part of what's happening here with Comet Pizza. Too many people think that it's like defining. It's almost like a feedback loop. These conspiracy theories imitating fiction. Mixed with reality in some way.
I see what you're saying.
So Comet Pizza is almost like, Pizzagate's version of Los Pollos Hermanos.
Oh, right. It's okay.
Hiding in plain sight. That's why they have the logo, that looks like boy love, because it's like we're hiding in plain sight. Like we can, if we're really doing this, then why are we doing it so obviously, kind of a thing. You know what I mean? But I'm not saying that means John Podesta is a pedophile.
Good.
That's how one of the believers in Pizzagate would probably explain it. But I wanted to mention just really quickly there's a couple things in the emails has nothing to do with food, have nothing to do with spirit cooking, have nothing to do with pizza, that are strange to me and do suggest possible coded language. The only one that's like that for me that really stands out is, I've been dreaming about your hot dog stand in Hawaii. That email, it's weird. I have no idea what it means. Doesn't mean that he's, sucking kids off in Hawaii. I mean, that seems to be the the conclusion that
no.
And the other one, it's odd, but I think it could be easily explained. Is the one about the kids, the different ages. They'll be ready in the hot tub. Their ages like 8, 11, and 13 or whatever. This is maybe how detached rich people talk when they party with other friends who also have kids. Like my kids are whatever age, like maybe, they'll get along with the other kids at the pool party. They're like almost like scientifically describing the kids' ages. I don't know. I'm not, again, to me, that's not a evidence of some kind of delivery of children in the pool.
But what do you think hot dog? Now, once again, I got corrected. A lot of people told me cheese pizza meant child porn when I said cheese pizza.
No. It apparently does.
Hot dog?
4chan and internet culture. Apparently it does. It is CP, cheese pizza, is code for child porn.
Right, but hot dog and hot dog stand are code?
No. Well, this is the thing, is those ciphers that went around the alt-right, and we should mention this later, or maybe when we establish the chronology a little better, said hot dog means something. I don't remember what they said it means. But I don't think it means that, and that's not why I think it's interesting. It just doesn't seem like John Podesta had a hot dog stand in Hawaii. Well, that's probably obvious he doesn't. So what did he mean he was dreaming about his hot? Is that, what does that mean?
I know, but why would you? Okay, so all right, but here's another part of this.
Silly, what are they actually talking about there? I'd like to know.
Right, but here's the thing:
Hawaii together or something.
I mean, maybe it is code, but here's the thing: like I would say, or maybe there's a hot dog stand. I don't know, but it's like here's the question: like,
yeah, sure. I mean, that's possible.
We're jumping to the conclusion.
Hot dog stand.
He just likes hot dogs. But the question is like, why are we immediately maybe it's code, but why does it immediately mean pedophilia code? It could just be, it could be an affair. It could be drugs. It could be.
I even think that playing dominoes on cheese or pasta was a drug joke, in the same way someone would say, should I play dominoes on weed or on, booze or something? Kind of like they're such foodies that they're describing food like it's drugs. That's to me how I interpreted that email. But again, it's not code for child porn. It's in a long email about food and hanging out with different family members. So unless they're just weirdo, crazy pervert, like not just normal pedophiles, but they also just casually talk about family and then jump into code for, sex with kids, it doesn't make sense. But one of the other things that was coincidental to me, that's not evidence of anything, but it is interesting that this just sort of popped up in the sort of the Pizzagate investigations, is it's not the girl's hands taped to the table or pictures of the kill room or whatever, showing James Alefantis's I don't know, was a fridge that he's taking a picture of, where or a dead pig. There's like a picture on Instagram of that. There is a picture, however, of a guy standing next to someone else wearing a shirt that says "I love infants," which somebody did point out on Reddit, which I thought was an interesting coincidence, is James Alefantis, if you write his name out in French, does pronounce to "I love infants."
Enfantes. Oh, okay.
It is a weird coincidence. Not just because his name, but I mean, I think someone only found that his name translated to that because they saw the picture of a guy literally wearing a shirt that said in French, "I heart infants." So that is a weird coincidence. And then also, the logo for the pizza place next door to Kama Pizza, it looks a little bit like the Boy Lover, logo that was in that FBI document, which is a real FBI document. I don't know how it came up in the discussions of Pizzagate. It looks a little bit like it. That's not that weird on its own. But the weird part to me was that the business across the street, the bistro, the logo that they had on their website was the same logo from the FBI document of Girl Lover, which is just a really bizarre coincidence. It's kind of, could just be one of those glitch in the matrix moments. You're just sort of seeing what you want to see, and it's sort of lining up at the right time. I have no idea. I don't think that they're conducting some kind of pedophile ring in this joint, these businesses across the street, but I could see how just that would be like an aha moment for the people who are already invested in it.
Right,
So
but isn't that a good
it.
point? Okay, but isn't that a good point? And what you're talking about, and I'm glad you laid out what the weird coincidences are that you've seen, is that if you're primed to look for stuff, aren't you eventually going to see what you want to believe? Aren't you? I mean, I'm not saying that that's what's happening here. I'm just saying for me, that's, as someone who's extremely skeptical about this, I just feel like if you went into anything, you'd see, and you were really this committed to it, you could find little ways to connect the dots, because the human mind is built for pattern recognition. It's built for conspiracy on some level, or it's built to find connections. And I wonder how much of a role that's playing. Maybe there's something weird going on. I don't know. I mean, there is some stuff that's weird, for sure. Like Tony Podesta's art is weird. That's some weird art, but it's also, I mean, it's like, it's kind of like, a guy says he's punk rock. Like, it's like edgy, stupid. Oh, somebody was shocked. That's exactly what they wanted. That's exactly why they have it. Oh, it's so shocking because we're so edgy. We're not these like boring rich people who are profiting off of, lobbying the government and working for anyone who will pay us. We're like these rebels, And
they want to I believe there are people in DC, just like the people who, go to Bohemian Grove. There are people who they get off on this sort of the projection of themselves as powerful and mysterious figures who can, make these big movements and do things behind the scene. I mean, John Podesta was interviewed in a different article that people were pulling up from the Pizzagate, research teams all over the place. That in and of itself is just an interesting insight into the way these people in DC think, where he said, they were in his office and he had a painting on the wall, and you can find this on Google Image. It's an old famous painting of like two monks looking down at a guy, and one of the guys has a fork like eating part of the guy's leg. It's an old oil painting. I don't know exactly what era it's from. And the people interviewing him are like, so what is this painting about? Can you explain it to me? And he's like, well, one of the mottos I have here is like, someone doing work in DC is it's better to be the man with the fork than the man on the table. So that's the kind of like type of person he is. He wants to seem like he's a cutthroat, ruthless sort of guy. And that's probably another reason why, and this is another thing people have used from Pizzagate, that Andrew Breitbart video where he goes up to Dave Weigel and says, I know about you, Podesta. What skeletons do you have in your closet, Podesta? Like, he had his he was over the target back then. He knew Podesta, was projecting himself probably as this powerful guy, and it just probably really pissed him off.
Yeah, but the language of that, I for a while I've been writing a lot about Wall Street. Excuse me, and you will never hear more like ridiculously violent language from a group of people who spend all day in a room looking at things on a computer screen, like rip your face off. We're gonna get our faces ripped off.
Yeah.
Don't catch a falling knife. Step on their throat. Kill them. Rip. You'll see these emails. Rip his eyes out and fuck the holes. Like you'll see like the most like nastiest, brutal language. It's been it's been in films. There's a great film, The Wolf of Wall Street, about this fraudster, Jordan Belfort, and he gets there the first day and he never heard people curse so much because they're all saying like, I'm gonna kill you, I'm gonna fuck you. So the tough language is very much, it's mostly from people in a projecting that kind of macho-ness who aren't doing anything macho, right? He's taking meetings and eating lobster. He's not, out in the jungle slitting people's throats with a knife. These guys are on Wall Street. They're ripping people off, but they're not actually. So I just when I hear that stuff, I don't read it the same way someone who isn't exposed to the culture of Washington enough to understand that this is not the House of Cards. When someone said he's not throwing anyone in front of a train. It's not yes, it's abusive language, and yes, there's people saying all this kind of sick stuff, but it's really, what's that phrase from Peter Thiel about Trump? Don't take him literally, but take him seriously. I'm sure there's some stuff, some of the art stuff is weird, but some of the stuff is just, these people talk like this. I mean, Jack Abramoff, before he went away, used all sorts of this kind of macho, destroy him. In fact, he stupidly, like Podesta, said it in an email, which is how he got busted for his corruption scam with ripping off Native Americans. He called them troglodytes. He said, we got to do these Get Five, which was this kickback scheme he had orchestrated with this guy named Scanlon. And I just wonder if people are just really overinterpreting the language of the culture of Washington. What do you think about that?
Oh, definitely. And I think it's silly too, because I mean, and I do think some of this relates to Bohemian Grove and sort of what just the idea of I think there are definitely some of these people in DC who like that there's conspiracy fiction out there about them to a certain point. I think even Barack Obama made a joke on a Hillary campaign speech about how Alex Jones called him and Hillary demons, which maybe to a certain point that seems funny, and they like that people, there's people out there that think of them like that. But I mean, obviously, Pizzagate it has crossed that line. I don't.
It was funny until that guy came in with a gun.
Yeah, I don't think John Podesta appreciates it anymore. If he thought it was funny for a moment, they took it really seriously. I mean, there's evidence that Hillary thinks that Pizzagate may have had a role in her loss. I mean, there were people from her campaign,
really,
Flynn, when he resigned, and Flynn's son, saying this is what happens when spread fake news. That was the issue they decided to raise, not the Russia issue, as they were leaving. I thought that was interesting.
Oh yeah. I remember that. No, I remember you talking about the football. They spiked the football and said, "Thanks for," because of the Pizzagate thing. I think. Well,
and then she quoted that tweet and said something about fake news in her tweet.
Yeah. No, I remember. I know exactly what you're talking about.
So,
and we should note.
And David Brock. I mean, I don't know if we should even play this. Maybe we should cut it into the broadcast at some point. Is his reaction that you pointed out to me shows just how, and it touched him personally, even though it's his ex-boyfriend.
But let's, for the audience who doesn't know this, we haven't introduced the David Brock element. Yeah. So can you go into just a second, who David Brock is and why his connection to this?
Yeah, you know more about me, but more than David Brock than I do. But basically, as far as I understand it, his sort of claim to fame was being in Mena, Arkansas, or around the areas of Arkansas that Bill Clinton had a bunch of these alleged scandals in everywhere, and everything from that he had a black son that he abandoned to that he had people killed in Arkansas. Just pretty much all the 90s Clinton conspiracy theories involved or were propelled in some way by David Brock. I think he even helped smear Anita Hill.
Yes, he definitely helped. He wrote a whole book about Anita Hill.
So
called her slutty.
This is one of those guys, not even really a shadow player, because he was very upfront. He was kind of almost like a proto Ann Coulter, but not about general social issues, but more about specific things to try to ruin the Clintons and Democrats, and different politicians or whatever. And eventually he switched to being, conservative rabble rouser to a guy that was helping the Democratic Party. Wrote a book called Blinded by the Right, where he, I don't even think he really outed Matt Drudge. There's never really been a question if Matt Drudge is straight. But he claimed he was in a sexual relationship with Matt Drudge, that Ann Coulter was a blatant anti-Semite in private, that she was a chain smoker and a heavy alcoholic. He just like smeared a lot of these conservative allies, that he had made in the 90s in this book, switch sides, kind of like Huffington did when she switched from being a conservative to a so-called liberal or whatever. And then now he's running what he calls the Trump war room or something, where, and I don't know what his involvement was in the actual Hillary campaign. You could fill this in for me, Daniel. I know that now that what he's focusing on is websites like Media Matters that he runs, and the Trump war room, as he calls it, where it's 24/7 all about defeating Donald Trump, somehow just destroying him in any way they can, either by trying to run candidates or just media smear campaigns or even dirty tricks. I don't know exactly what he's up to, but I know that he just had a heart attack to either today or yesterday. I don't know when we're going to release this, but he had a heart attack recently, I'll say, and he survived. So that's pretty much all I know about him. But he basically also dated James Alefantis, the owner of this Comet Pizza place. He dated James when he had already switched sides to be a Democratic operative. And James Alefantis has been his ex-boyfriend for many years. I don't know exactly how long. But when David Brock was asked about Pizzagate, I think it was in an NPR interview.
That was a Politico interview with Glenn Thrush, now of the New York Times.
He asked him about it, and he basically started sobbing in reaction to being asked about it, because of how, and this was after the gunman had gone into his ex-boyfriend James's pizza parlor and shot a gun in the pizza parlor. And he just broke down, started sobbing, had an extremely intense personal reaction to the whole thing, which is kind of weird in some way, karmic, justice, you could say, for him basically being so involved in this cottage industry of Clinton conspiracies in the 90s that now it's come full circle and sort of came and bite him, him in the ass in a weird way. So
yeah, I mean, right. I mean, for people who don't know the history of David Brock, you outlined a lot of what's correct. He was part of something called the Arkansas Project, and he used to write for something called the American Spectator. Actually, I think the American Spectator is still around. And he was bankrolled by a guy who died recently, a billionaire, Richard Mellon Scaife, who is heir to the Mellon Bank fortune. And the Arkansas Project was designed to destroy Bill Clinton. This is stuff Brock, as you said, admitted. And he went to Arkansas and started a lot of conspiracies. He said in an interview I know we've both seen with Adam Curtis, he said, was it true or not true? It doesn't matter. He kind of said, it just hurt. It was working. And he came up with a bunch of things, right? Illegitimate child from a black prostitute. He came up with he promoted the theory that Vince Foster was not a suicide, but someone who was killed because he had been having an affair with Hillary Clinton. He promoted the idea that I'm sorry?
I didn't know Brock was involved in the Vince Foster stuff.
Promoting the theory, yeah. In fact, he was part of what would eventually become called the Clinton Files, which was with no relation, which was this weird, a total condensing of all these conspiracies, kind of like Oliver Stone and JFK, where he just puts out every theory, even if they contradict. And another one that he promoted was the idea that Clinton was involved, Bill Clinton, when governor of Arkansas, was involved in drug smuggling outside of that. It was somehow related to Iran-Contra. Most of these things weren't true. The one thing that was true, Whitewater, by the way, was also something that he had gotten started doing his work for the American Spectator. Basically, what he said he did is he went down to Arkansas and asked everybody from the people who were very credible to the people who weren't credible or were kind of Roger Stone-ish, willing to lie just to smear someone. And then he just put a more respectable, sort of put it in a more professional setting, or at least sort of cataloged it, all these rumors. And so all this, but some of the stuff, as we now know, was true. And the stuff that was true wasn't all these dark conspiracies or necessarily monetary corruption. It was that Bill Clinton was a sexual, I don't want to say sexual predator, extremely sexually active, extremely unfaithful to Hillary, right? There was this thing with the troopers that they were covering. And some of this stuff was, it's clear, at least in some cases, Bill Clinton did have extramarital sex. We don't know if it was consensual or not. Juanita Broderick says it was not. But he got all that together. So he was sort of a hatchet man for the right, which is what he claims he essentially was in that book you mentioned. And then he switched sides. And yes, he played a major role in the election of 2016. He did not play an official role, but he was part of he's built an entire network. And he said that I believe he said he spent $70 million, or it might have been 700 million. I can't remember. It was some large, extremely large amount of money in his network, which includes Media Matters, Correct the Record, which is the group he started. In the interview with Politico, he talks about it. So he has this network of opposition research, which is basically, I guess the difference between opposition research and kind of the smear stuff that he did before is opposition research is in theory always true, even if it's unpleasant. Whether everything that Correct the Record said was true or whether everything that Media Matters says is true, I mean, it has a little bit more credibility than American Spectator for sure. But so that's his role. And the interesting thing for Pizzagate is his connection to Comet Pizza, which I'm sure fueled this conspiracy even more. And of course, this is another key point here. You look at it from one direction and it looks like it's all connected, right? That James, and now you're discovering links. But if you think about it for a second, Washington, D.C. is a small town. Comet Pizza, why would John Podesta also be going? Because maybe he does know David Brock, and maybe they all know James Alphonsus. Maybe it's not, I mean, these people are not hiding their connections to each other. So maybe, yes, there's a connection that goes to David Brock because maybe that's how they're all Clinton team members. They're all on the team Clinton. So of course they have interlocking stuff going on because they all are working for the same goal. Wouldn't it be weird if they didn't have any connections? Wouldn't it be weird if they weren't connected in any way? So I think you can look at it different ways, but that's who David Brock is. And I think, but he's also, because of his, I guess you could say, betrayal of the right, or just his involvement in subterfuge, well, not subterfuge, his involvement in opposition research and not necessarily dirty tricks, although he's accused of it, that adds a layer to Pizzagate, right? Because here's this guy who's the dark lord of the, he wants to be, he said he wanted to build, this is what he said, truly the right-wing Koch brothers network. That's what, to defeat Trump or destroy Trump once he's in office. So here's a guy who says stuff like that and has this history. And I think when they saw that he was involved, man, I imagine that lit it up even further.
Yeah, I mean, but oddly, his name doesn't come up very often in the overall story structure the way I've seen it. I think just the fact that his ex-boyfriend is James Alefantis has come up, but I haven't seen very many people connect his name back to right-wing conspiracy culture. Not very many people have done that. They just sort of, only talk about his role in being like a Democratic operative. Well, they
might not remember. This was like 20 years ago.
I mean, Andrew Breitbart, was he starting the Huffington Post with Arianna Huffington when he was conservative and when she was also conservative, or because I know that he was involved in the Huffington Post too. So
yeah, he was involved in setting it up, but I think my understanding is they were both kind of just. I don't think he was as conservative as he ended up being, but they were both kind of just entrepreneurial about it. Like this is a way to create a platform, and he's not credited with that much. But remember, before there was a time when all media, or at least if you want to be a major media company, you weren't hyper partisan. So today, the Huffington Post is a Democratic Party site, or it's a progressive site that's aligned with the Democratic Party. Initially, it was supposed to be a news site because newspapers weren't transitioning to the web. And Breitbart built his empire first as being a kind of the go-to site for essentially wire stories. Like if there was a Reuters story or an AP story, Drudge would link to it, but he would link to it from Breitbart's site. So Breitbart would get the traffic, even though Breitbart was just, like many news organizations do, has a section that just reprints wire stories, right? You read your local newspaper, you'll see a lot of Associated Press on the byline, meaning they didn't produce it. So Drudge started throwing him a lot of business, and then at some point, I'm sure he's written about it somewhere, he had a book, Righteous Indignation or something. He decided to build these, big government, big Hollywood stuff. But yeah, for a minute, they were all kind of friendly with each other, and maybe you could argue if that was a organic, or maybe there's money in being oppositional. In either way, the Breitbart, that's something we should talk about, actually. That is kind of, because if I remember the tweet that people reference in Pizzagate that I get sent occasionally, Breitbart actually accused John Podesta of being a child molester.
Child sex trafficker.
Okay.
And it was in relation to, from what I understand, the James O'Keefe Acorn exposés. Because remember, the real meat for conservatives in that was that it was actually Acorn was somehow allowing or paying for pimps and prostitution rings.
Oh, that's right, because James O'Keefe dressed up like a pimp.
And I think one of the prostitutes, James O'Keefe posing as a pimp, said was underage.
Right.
And I think that's what Andrew Breitbart was referring to, if you line up the timing of that. Although I'm not 100% sure. I don't think, a lot of
Podesta is not connected. Podesta is not directly connected to Acorn, I don't think. But I agree that there was a point.
He was actually.
Oh, was he? Okay.
After, either in the middle of the scandal or after it, he started to run it. He did actually, and I don't know exactly what his role was, but yeah, he did run it at some point.
Okay, so maybe that's what. Okay, so that's interesting is people have reframed that then. What your explanation for it, which we'll go into later, is we'll go into in another episode, is that this was that a comment was related to the Acorn videos that Breitbart pushed, including right. So those were major exposés for Breitbart. They went viral. They became big hits.
They legitimized Project Veritas and James O'Keefe. For sure.
True. Yeah. They were definitely O'Keefe's breakthrough moment, if you will. Mm-hmm. But you're saying that that's what that tweet's about, where that tweet has been repurposed to mean, hey, before he died, quote unquote, mysteriously, Breitbart was going to expose John Podesta. And now the theory you'll see is not only is Podesta this sex trafficker, but Breitbart knew. And that somehow is related to his mysterious death. But what you're actually saying, what's interesting, is that that's related to something completely different and has been years later. By the way, this is years ago. This is before Andrew Breitbart died. So this is not anything related to the Podesta emails, which happened in 2016. No. But you're saying that, what people appear to be doing with Pizzagate, and this goes back to what I talked about earlier, with things are getting repurposed. So Jeffrey Epstein repurposed this tweet that's been screen capped and sent around, has been repurposed to mean this is something related to Pizzagate, when he may be, as we have, don't confirm it, but maybe related to just Acorn and this James O'Keefe dressing like a pimp.
But and if anyone's listening out there who takes issue with that take on that tweet, please correct us if you have any counter evidence to suggest that's not what he's talking about. But also, I think part of what's playing into this is how conservatives use the phrase child sex trafficking. And I think it's become a politicized thing. I know this is going to maybe sound weird, but the idea of sex work, prostitution, this phrase and nomenclature of child sex trafficking has been used by basically anti-prostitution, not just lobbying groups, but state governments to shut down and criminalize, clamp down on prostitution in ways that make the penalty stronger, because they try to associate any, some prostitution in certain inner cities and other areas is done, often the prostitutes are not of age, they're below, 17, 16 sometimes. I mean, we've all seen Taxi Driver. That stuff really does happen in real life. But this is what they're conflating, that, which is a pretty everyday occurrence, unfortunately, even in the United States. Many places are all around the world. They're conflating that with the idea of a sort of an underground pedophile ring. This idea of pimping out underage prostitutes. And I'm sure it has happened. I'm sure pimps have prostituted out actual child, if you will, child sex slaves. That's not something that has never happened before. That does happen. So, but that, again, they're conflating even these sex trafficking roundups. A lot of the law enforcement roundups that are happening now, I think one of them was a sting operation in San Diego they did it was basically a sting operation for all these prostitution rings. And they're basically saying it was a success in clamping down on child sex trafficking rings because a few of the prostitutes saved or rescued or whatever were under 18. And maybe one of them was 13 or something like that. So the FBI, in these places, like to brag and act like that's what they're doing. They go for the most, it's just like they're saying drug dealers give drugs to kids. It's kind of, I think there is some relationship here between, they try to polarize that and act like all prostitution is in some form accepting child sex trafficking. That's what it leads to, or that's what the black market of prostitution is connected to. Sort of like saying when you buy drugs, you're helping fund terrorism or something. So there is some sort of conservative worldview that conflates that. And I think maybe that's what Andrew Breitbart was cynically even playing on by saying child sex trafficking. Again, could be wrong. If anyone's out there wants to correct anything we've said, feel free in the comments or wherever.
Yeah, I mean, there is the part of Pizzagate that there's part of Pizzagate that I think is a question of what sexual morality clearly has some role in this, and the sense that there's a deviancy. I actually think it's been pretty muted, the fact that James Alphonsus is gay. I haven't really seen that become a major plot point. As we talked about earlier, Hillary Clinton being accused of a lesbian, like some sort of deviant. I think there is that's the part of the cultural critique of it that's interesting, which is there's a focus on deviancy and the elite. That the elite are all these deviants in some way, and that goes back to that. Is it because this is the way the elite are, or they like deviant people because they can blackmail them? And I think that's driving some of this, the intensity, which is that now I also want to get to the stuff that drove this guy to come shoot at Comet Pizza. It's gone beyond apparently sexual exploitation, which is bad enough, but that he was being told that there were secret tunnels and that children were being killed. Am I reading that correctly or remembering that correctly?
I think that even Alex Jones, before he's deleted these videos, I remember him repeating the idea that, Hillary Clinton and Anthony Weiner and Huma Abedin and Podesta were involved in killing kids and having sex with them. So if InfoWars was putting out stuff like that, and at the same time saying that Hillary's a demon and she smells like sulfur, I mean, imagine how that filters down to, everybody else, not just conspiracy websites, but, there's a lot of regular conservatives that probably watch and listen to InfoWars and read it now. So
but there was some weird connection with the trafficking that we were talking about, and that was this thing in Haiti. Do you know what I'm talking about? There's some weird. It's all these tangential stuff, but there was something Sibley or something. She's someone that was in the Podesta emails who got arrested for trafficking kids, but it wasn't sex trafficking. She was trying to like steal a bunch of orphans out of Haiti or something, and she got arrested for it, and then she died while still in Haiti, and everyone thought that she was murdered, and that helped fuel Pizzagate even more, if I'm remembering correctly. Does that ring a bell? Yeah, I thought there was some sort of, there's always, and this goes to the point of, I mean, maybe there's a real issue here, or maybe people are just finding connections everywhere. So there's, well, the Haiti thing about that woman, and I wish I remember her name, does seem like there's something there that's worth looking into, you know, completely apart from Pizzagate. And I don't even know if it has to do with necessarily the trafficking charge, which it was an actual criminal case against her. Right. I mean, Jeffrey Epstein, there's something worth looking into. Anthony Weiner, there's something worth looking into. But there's the Haiti stuff that the Clintons were involved in is dirty. Yeah, oh yeah, there's absolutely cash and carry government. The Clinton foundations work there. But that's my point. Like, it's all getting sucked into this narrative. So there's a woman who's apparently been involved in human trafficking, maybe, or for, you know, sell orphans. I'm not sure what it was. We'll look into it or get that correctly stated. But that gets sucked into Pizzagate. Yeah. Epstein gets sucked in. Anthony Weiner gets sucked in. The email investigation into deleted State Department emails gets sucked into Pizzagate. The Podesta, but so it seems like all these things are getting repurposed, and that's what makes me wonder, and why we should have people on, and we will, who have a coherent theory that isn't just opportunistically grabbing every little. Anytime somebody does something wrong, I will take it and repurpose it, you know what I mean? Like, and reform it into something that fits into this slot. Of course. That's what it seems to me. It's one of the reasons I'm so skeptical of Pizzagate, is because as I'm thinking about it, it seems a lot of the narrative seems so opportunistic. It seems like I found a tangential connection to something. Okay, let's put it in there. Like, okay, well, yeah, go ahead. That's the problem with most, you know, any conspiracy theory, is that most of it's going to be like that. It's going to be tangential stuff. While there's a very small percentage of people trying to, you know, connect, you know, real dots together. I mean, you have it with 9/11. I don't know if Pizzagate's even been around long enough to get anything. Right, but the core, here's the issue that I'd like to know. Because there's no real crime. First of all, most other conspiracies at least revolve around an actual known crime. Right. JFK, a president. Why is it so resilient? In plain, you know, in daylight, in the middle of the day, and in that case with 9/11, almost 3,000 people being killed. Makes sense why there's a lot of conspiracies. There's no proof of a crime yet. So, but sorry. Go ahead. No, you actually hit the nail on part of what I'm saying. I was going to say there's no core to it. You're saying there's no essential crime. That's what's so interesting about Pizzagate to me, or just that. I mean, even if I was trying to be disinterested in it, it's still coming at me all the time because people are still talking about it and sending stuff around about it. But that is, you know, what is the core of Pizzagate? What is this? Like, you're right. 9/11. There's lots of conspiracy theories about it. I'm not one of those either, but there's a central act. It's incredibly impactful on our country. It's a world historical act. It is visually stunning. 2 trade centers and the Pentagon coming down. Psychologically traumatizing. It's psychologically traumatizing. Exactly. It really puts a dent in reality for people. JFK, same issue. And that's why you understand there's going to be people who will talk about 9/11 forever. There's nothing you're going to be able to tell them, you know, but that's what's fueling it, is a world historical event. The assassination of the president is a world historical event. What is the core of Pizzagate? What is the actual core of it? Is it that John Podesta, is John Podesta even considered the leader of this?
No, I don't think so.
He's a peripheral figure in the trafficking.
I think that he's I that's a good question. I haven't seen any. I haven't seen anything. And just for the record, just for the listeners out there, I'm a little bit of a truther. I've looked at a lot of the 9/11 stuff. So I think some of it's really good. I think most of it's garbage. I'm not as familiar with the JFK world, but I'm very open to it. I don't know what theory I necessarily believe in, but with this Pizzagate, partly because there's no crime, but also because I don't know what the core of it is, and I don't. And to answer your question about is John Podesta a peripheral sex trafficker or is he at the heart of this? I haven't even seen anybody try to even lay out what they think the structure of it is, exactly from A to B, what they think is going on. I've seen many people try to do that with 9/11, maybe because the theories have been around for so much longer. But I think that we've moved into an era where the conspiracy theories that rise to the top sometimes have the least actual real dot connecting and core to them, and they're more just these, weird leaps of conjecture. I mean, look at all the Illuminati symbolism stuff that's out there online. I mean, all that Illuminati stuff is like that. It's sort of a sandbox for people to just make one logical leap to the next, based on numerology or this symbol looks like this symbol, and so there's a whole and I don't know if that's all what Pizzagate is, but I think the core of it is back to what you said at the beginning, is this general vague conspiracy theory of these elite pedo rings that the elitists and the politicians especially are involved in, not just that they're depraved and evil people, but they're also involved in some kind of elite pedophile ring, either because that's how evil and depraved they are, and because they're compromised in some way, and this is how they're doing the bidding of even bigger puppet master, bigger powerful elitists. So, but I also think that, and this is one theory I've been toying with just in my own head, that what's happening in England right now, is a shift to the right, more tendencies towards more fascist mode of thinking, more tribalism, more nationalism, not just in England, but in other parts of Europe. We're experiencing that too now here. But one of the things that's interesting about how Europe seems to be, or especially the UK seems to be almost experiencing a more intense version of this right now, is that the pedophile elite pedo ring conspiracy in England has been one of the most popular, if not the most popular conspiracy theory there for decades, that takes almost like the number one slot. I mean, I think 7/7 bombing conspiracies are somewhere maybe in 5th place, Princess Diana maybe 2nd place, but David Icke is one of the big people who have fueled those there as well. But there's a lot of other sort of I don't know how many of these.
Wait a minute, I thought David Icke was the reptilian guy.
He is, but he pulled on real things too. He's kind of like an Alex Jones, who's even gone further than Alex Jones with the reptilian stuff. But in England, he's done similar thing to Alex Jones, where he'll pull from sort of a mixture of fact and fiction, conspiracy fact and fiction, and mix it together. So he was mentioning Jimmy Savile's necrophilia back in like the late 80s, David Icke was. And when he mentioned it, I think he mentioned it on like a TV show, and people like in the audience, audibly gasped, and were starting to boo him, when it turned out to be actually true. The rumors that he was a necrophiliac was enough from different people who were, it's like, oh my God, he actually was. He didn't just steal things from dead bodies and take sexual pictures of dead bodies. He actually had, sex with dead bodies.
Right, but let's go there for a second. Let's go there for a second, because that's there were these major cases of sexual misconduct by powerful people. Bill Cosby, but also is one, but that's more for adults. There was Michael Jackson. the Catholic Church, which is actually a pedophilia elite conspiracy, right?
Mhm.
That's an organization that had systemic abuse of children and then worked conspiratorially to move priests out of areas where they had sexually molested children into areas where it would not be accused of that, right? They moved priests all over the world. So that's actually an elite pedophilia conspiracy if you're looking for one. Apparently that doesn't interest people that much. But so there's Michael Jackson, there's Jerry Sandusky, and there's Jimmy Savile over in the UK. But what's interesting, what's I think doesn't play into the core is you see abusive power circumstances where people who are celebrities. Jerry Sandusky was close with Joe Paterno, who was a god on the campus of Penn State because Penn State football team was everything. There are people who only went to college there because they loved the football team. Yes, he did. Yes, I'm not excusing anything. I'm saying, but that explains a culture of permissiveness for a quote elite on campus, if you will, right? College and high school football players get away with murder, right? It starts with they don't want to get, teachers don't give them bad grades because they know if they get bad grades, they won't be able to play. And it ends with gang rapes and a famous case in Ohio, Steubenville, that they almost got away with it because they were the star football players. So there's that culture. There's, Michael Jackson, famous celebrity, rich and powerful, has powerful attorneys. If you go after him, he's going to come back at you. And there's a shame and humiliation. Apparently the Jimmy Savile situation, which I read a little bit about in preparation for this, was absolutely horrible. He was a famous person in the UK. He got on the board of a mental institute and other hospitals, and they gave him keys, and he would go in and molest people, and including apparently this weird necrophiliac stuff. But in all these cases, it doesn't seem like a concerted conspiracy in the sense that there is an organization promoting and protecting them. Unlike, like I said, the one exception is the Catholic Church. Yeah. It seems like you have individuals who are just above the law themselves. There's not a group of people behind them. It's just they're famous, rich, and powerful. And famous, rich, and powerful people have been getting away with terrible things since there were famous, rich, and powerful people. It doesn't, you know what I mean? So on some level, you almost think that people who are bringing this issue, they're really upset about class divisions. I mean, that's my left-wing read into it. They're upset about people seeming to be above the law, which, of course, after the 2008 financial crisis would make sense because there's so many people who perpetrated it that didn't get prosecuted. So I wonder if it's a kind of, I think it's a misread to see it as this part of this larger conspiracy when it could just be, a failure of justice in individual cases because these individual predators were just, Bill Cosby was an American icon, right? Before he got accused of drugging and raping all these women. In fact, it took years. He had been doing it. I mean, the body count for Jimmy Savile is like, I think from what I read from the Scotland Yard report, we're talking like 300 people he molested, including children and including live on TV. So doesn't that make more sense, at least from my perspective, that it's just rich and powerful people getting a pass on bad behavior rather than they're part of an organization that is dedicated to pedophilia and they're just members of it?
Of course. I mean, yeah, obviously. And the one thing missing from all these examples is these rich and powerful people who are involved in, molesting or having sex with this many underage teens or kids. They weren't buying, kids from sex trafficking agencies. None of the victims that came forward. And these real life examples where we have, in some cases, dozens of known victims. I don't know how many it ended up being in Cosby's case. I think it was over 30 or something of rape people who accuse him of raping them. None of them said they were trafficked, Right. I think that would come up if these rich and powerful, you could call Michael Jackson. I don't know if he's an elitist, but you can call, I don't know if you could call Jerry Sun. No, I guess you can't call them elitists necessarily.
They were local elites. Yeah, Jerry Sandusky was a big deal at Penn State.
that's the thing. It's like billionaires and the real so-called elitists, like they're more mysterious to people. So I guess it allows them to think that they're, at the higher level, that people are doing, buying kids on some kind of marketplace. But the Jimmy Savile thing, I could see how that could be one plank that on some deep-seated level really convinces people that there is some kind of conspiracy to protect. It's not just that the rich and powerful are protected or people look the other way or they're untouchable. It's that the industries or organizations that surround them actively protect them. And I mean, the BBC, there's a lot of examples of them, throwing out complaints made against him. People who worked at the hospital being afraid to, talk about. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think there is something about not just a conspiracy of willful ignorance, but there's like, it's beyond just a sort of a conspiracy of silence of people looking the other way. But that doesn't mean that there's some kind of, conspiracy of silence surrounding, or something even worse, a conspiracy of pedophile networks. But I do think that because that was so crazy, what happened, and at least Cosby,
Pizzagate.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think because that was so crazy, and also because Cosby, it eventually came back to haunt him when he was still alive. I mean, the guy's,
it's haunting him right now. He's going before court.
He's almost blind now, and I don't know how much longer he has to live. But Jimmy Savile somehow escaped all this until he was dead. He had accusations made against him, but people in positions of power made sure to sort of quash them. I think it only went as far as like 1 or 2 civil lawsuits. And it was sort of this weird, openly known secret, even by people like, Johnny Rotten said something in a BBC interview about Jimmy Savile having a fetish for, teen girls that weren't legal or something. And they banned Johnny Rotten from coming on the BBC. So somehow people even knew it back then. I mean, that's a long time for something like that to be kept secret.
Yeah, but look who's covering for him. I mean, the thing with Jimmy Savile and Sandusky and the people who are covering for him are covering because, one, they fear for their jobs. They're usually low-ranking people who are, and for me, when I read it, and this is, once again, this is a perception issue. I see people protecting talent, meaning I'm at the BBC. Here's our star guy, right? Here's an established name. We need to protect him, not because we're part of a satanic cult that believes in raping children, but because here's a talent that we don't want to get embarrassed. It'll embarrass us, right? Which it, by the way, did. And I also wonder about according to one of the reports, the mental hospital called him a, quote, sex pest, which is a very playful way of describing someone who's molesting patients. And you have to wonder if there's like been a cultural change around, for the older people who did this, around sexual molestation, and maybe it's taken more seriously today. I mean, it doesn't explain Sandusky and it doesn't explain Michael Jackson, but the Jimmy Savile one is just so strange, and it's so comprehensive that you wonder if that had something to do with it. But I mean, I think you can look at these and be very upset about it and think, what an unjust society, and look at all these powerful people who just made excuses for them and didn't do anything about it. And I get that. I just don't understand the gate part of it. It seems like it would just be Savile Gate or Michael Jackson, Jackson Gate, or, Cosby Gate. It wouldn't necessarily be a larger social structure of, hey, the elite do this. These aren't specific cases of abuses of power. This is just elite fashion, and they like it and they're into it, and this is part of elite culture in a sense, right? Because it has to go beyond just John Podesta. This is just, right? Because it has to be a network. That's the whole thing. They're making a network argument that this isn't These aren't individual abusers who exist, by the way, in all stratas of society. I mean, yes, there's Jimmy Savile's, but there's also the guy who's molesting someone locally, they just becomes, I mean, I think what underlies Pizzagate and why I kind of have a soft spot for it in a very, partially, is it's like they're upset about class injustice because the poor guy who molests a kid goes to jail, might get killed in jail actually, or goes in protective custody jail, and has to register as a sex offender for the rest of his life, and rightly so, on the registering a sex offender part. The rich people get away with it, right? Or like Jeffrey Epstein, who, if he was not a rich and powerful guy who could afford a great legal team, would have absolutely gone to jail for what he did, which was employing underage girls to sexually gratify him, which he pled guilty to. So I think that part of Pizzagate I kind of get. Like, the rich have a different set of rules. Where it gets weird, and where it gets, for me at least, that I don't quite connect, is the idea that this is some kind of larger, there's some sort of organization to this. There's some sort of network at the highest levels of government. And I guess that's where the core of it doesn't make sense for me. You see what I'm saying? Or am I out there a little bit?
No, I mean, they want to ascribe some kind of deep evil to these people. And I mean, it's kind of like, it reminds me in some ways of the snuff video cultural myth, that's been around for as long as I've been a kid, that there's these secret underground rings of people who trades in snuff videos that are made for like rich people.
Like 8mm.
Yeah. I mean, even Videodrome, which is a great movie, by the way, that I recommend, kind of implies, it's kind of playing on that myth a little bit, where they're beaming in this sort of illegal signal of people being tortured to death in the Philippines, or something. I don't know where it's supposed to be from, but I mean, it's the most evil, depraved thing you can imagine, combined with, when you combine it with the class injustice angle you're talking about. Not only are these people doing it in mass and in an organized way where they're, they could be sacrificing kids satanically, and then also buying sex from these children, from pimps or whatever, that they're also immune to the law at the same time. But at the same time, I think conservatives have not a special hatred for pedophiles. I mean, most of society, thinks of them, has hatred towards pedophiles, but conservatives, I don't think that they necessarily have any compassion for the little guy pedophile, in the sense that one of their biggest, talking points that the left has gone insane is they keep posting that Salon.
Oh yeah, I was just about to say that stupid Salon article.
Yeah, the guy who's like, I'm a pedophile and I'm not a monster. I mean, look, I get it. I mean, it's like, yeah, it's like a guy writing an article who is a pedophile or he has pedophile tendencies or whatever, and he's trying to argue for why we shouldn't see him as a monster. I mean, it should say that that's something that the left, thinks pedophiles are great. It's almost cartoonish, but, conservatives have, a lot of these conservative conspiracy people, especially, they have probably a little bit more of a sexually repressed lifestyle than other parts of the population. And they tend to be, they have this fixation on pedophilia. The same people who have that fixation on pedophilia are the same people who think that Miley Cyrus, wearing a G-string and air humping is some kind of satanic, Illuminati influence that's, sending coded messages to little girls to become gay or whatever. I don't know. There's a lot of weird sexual hangups that I think dominates a lot of this conservative conspiracy culture in general. But again, I'm sure there are a lot of people who are interested in Pizzagate and think there's something there who don't, who aren't coming even from a conservative Christian point of view. So
and also to say this, Robbie, that there's a way to look at it that isn't so about sexual repression so much as the elite. I'm not the elite, right? Quote unquote, which by the way I'm not, but I'm not the elite, and I'm upset about that. But the elite, people who are the elite, the reason I'm not in there is because I'm not like them. And I'm not like them because they're really bad people. Do you see what I'm saying? I think you can look at it, I don't want to say cynically, or you can look at it sort of from a base perspective and say, well, these people are so interested in pedophilia because they're sexually repressed, or maybe they're secret pedophiles themselves and it's projection, or they're not elite. They have a hatred for the elite, which is something I think a lot of conservatives do, although a lot of liberals do too, or a lot of lefties do. Liberals don't because they are the elite. But but a lot of the people who say that say, well, how do I say for myself, I would say they're very, bourgeois, superficial, greedy, corrupt. For them, it's like they're pedophiles. They're the worst thing ever, So there is a kind of elite vilification, I wonder, based on a sense of, I'm not saying envy, but resentment, which I think is a big driver of conspiracy theory. I think resentment drives a lot of conspiracy theory and certainly drives the conservative movement. So I just wonder, I think this first episode is good because we're getting out like all that we are trying to figure out without talking to any of these Pizzagaters. Because I'm just trying to figure out what they might be thinking. But that's my take on it, kind of, that they're going after the elite. Now, of course, one of the things that's kind of interesting about John Podesta, and this is one of I guess the last thing we'll talk about before we wrap up, or maybe you can talk about something else too if you want to throw in, is that he himself is kind of a conspiracy theorist about UFOs.
Kind of. He's big time.
He's a big time conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
In fact, he has used the power he's gained to look for, because he talks about it all the time. He was a consultant on the West Wing, and that keeps coming. If you watch the West Wing show, which is a famous, I think probably one of the most popular political shows of the last decade or so, certainly popular with people in DC, Aaron Sorkin show. There's always a character who brings up UFO on the quote giant block of cheese day or whatever. And it's like, that's Podesta's influence. He's actually said, he was asked about it point blank, I believe on MSNBC, it might have been Chris Matthews, and said like, yeah, if I'm in there, we're gonna find out some information. And he said, do you believe that there are UFOs? He's like, well, it depends on how you define. I mean, he really had all the defense.
Yeah.
He had really thought it out. So he kind of has, so it just shows you that even the elite, we're worried about the elite, and the elite are worried about the intergalactic elite. They're worried about an elite above them. I don't know. I just thought that was a fun tidbit that he himself was kind of a conspiracy theorist when it came to UFOs. Thoughts?
It is. I find that very interesting. I mean, he's done quite a few media appearances where he's talked exclusively about that. But I wanted to mention before we end the episode is something that I know when we invite, and if we haven't made it clear, and we probably didn't, is we want to invite anyone who knows a lot about the theory, preferably someone who's already done YouTube content or any kind of content they've produced about Pizzagate, who is extensively knowledgeable in the subject, who believes in it, to come on and discuss it with us. And we're not going to, try to intimidate you or ridicule you. I mean, we'll disagree with you, I'm sure on a number of things, but we still want to hear your theory, and we want to try to invite one of you guys or girls on the show every time we do one of these. So, but I know that one of the things that, so that'll be the end of that invitation. We'll mention again before we completely close out the show, and we'll put it in the notes. But I think one of the things that I've encountered when arguing this subject with people who believe it, Some of them believe it wholeheartedly. They believe every little piece of evidence, so-called evidence that comes out about it. Other people believe it more generally. But in every instance, the main thing that people lean on sort of as their final argument, they'll concede, you're right. We can't prove there's any crime in this specific instance, but we know elite pedophile rings exist among politicians and elites because of A, B, and C. And what they'll usually mention is, you know, the Franklin scandal, which is, I won't go into too much detail, and I personally don't know enough about it to speak on it, but it's apparently a foster home that pimped out children to politicians and elitists in the late 70s, 80s. And there was a TV special made about it, produced for a major TV network that was not actually released. And that gives the video that's online some more of a salacious, sort of mysterious quality, because it sort of claimed that this TV special was canned and it was sort of banned from TV because it was too controversial. But the Wikipedia claims that that's nothing in that scandal was proven. But that's sort of the main plank that people use to say that there really is proof of elite pedophile rings. And the other one is there was a documentary produced in Australia, I believe by Australian 60 Minutes, called Conspiracy of Silence, where a bunch of people in the UK come forward saying that they were trafficked as sex slaves when they were children to different members of parliament and different British elites and high up members, even some people in the royal family. And they name a bunch of names. A couple of the names they mention in the special have actually been outed as pedophiles. But, you know, once again, those are the two main things that people lean on. And then there's also a lot of other things where it's just testimonials from individual people that gets into wacky territory where, you know, there's a lot of, I think there's a handful of people who say they were MK Ultra victims who were traded around as, you know, pedophile ring
assassins.
Yeah, they were sex slaves and they were brainwashed via MK Ultra by the CIA. So there's all these different, you know, there's crossover there. But the Franklin scandal and this, you know, Australian TV special, as far as I know, are the main things that's what people have brought up to me. And they're like, you have to watch these, because once you do, you'll know that this is like a real thing that happens worldwide. This is what the elites are into. So once again, so that's just all I'll say on that. But again, that doesn't mean that anything, even these people who have brought those up to me have conceded that they can't prove anything in Pizzagate. And I haven't, you know, actually gotten a core theory or anything about what they actually believe, you know, connects this all together. So I'd like to hear that from someone, for sure.
Cool. All right. So we'll leave our contact information, and anyone who wants, we will hear you out. One thing I would ask respectfully is when you contact us by email, preferably, and we'll have the email up, is that you keep it somewhat short. Walls and walls of text, I just can't do that. I get that occasionally from someone who wants to talk about a story or whatever. And I'm telling you right now, you're not going to probably get the best response or the most timely response, because I'm going to have to sit there and wonder if I want to really read through it. So short and sweet, what you want to talk about, and we'll try to have you on the show, and we'll try to get through it piece by piece. And we're not going to ambush you. We don't have no interest in doing that. We actually just want to hear why you believe this.
Yep.
And we will ask probing questions, but it will be done extremely courteously and nicely. So thanks, Robbie. Here's episode 1, where and for those who are interested in it, we're laying out our views on it. And you know where we're at. We know where we stand. All I can say is we'll try to keep an open mind. So hit us up and we'll talk later. Bye.